The museum opened without public warning. Once a week, and only at 6 o'clock in the evening, no earlier, no later. Any excuse, no matter how petulant, was dismissed. Only those standing outside the gate at precisely 6 were permitted inside. No one knew the location of this playground for the wealthy. It was a secret kept even from God. And in this place, there was no God. My gods were the rich and famous, and they were merciless. There was no security here, nor any staff besides me on opening nights. It was a lawless palace built for the top 1% of the top 1%. The reason for our lack of employees was the same reason a celebrity might rent out an entire amusement park for a day. Uninhibited fun, free from judgmental eyes. I performed the same ritual I did every opening night. Adjusted my maroon waistcoat, combed my hair, shined my shoes. At 5:59, I descended the marble staircase with a spring in my step, not from excitement, but from a jumpiness born of instilled fear. The museum was about to become their toy shop yet again, and I, their plaything. This time, I could only pray they would wait until midnight before asking to see our paranormal relics. I could only pray they wouldn't let her out. The foyer was immense, with towering golden pillars wedged between ivory-hued marble floors and a mosaic glass ceiling that allowed the starlight to stream through. With one hand, I braced the door that stood 3 men high. With the other, I checked my watch. 6 o'clock. 4 pompous men and 2 lavishly dressed women strode in. They were draped in fur coats and alligator skin, adorned with diamonds from head to toe. The display was almost comical, but not to me. I'd seen it all many times before. Yet, one man at the back of the group showed no interest in flaunting his wealth. He was dressed for a trip to a convenience store, scuffed blue jeans, and a green t-shirt. I wonder what he did for a living, but I didn't know. What I did know, within minutes, was that the look on his face suggested he wanted me dead for sport. I announced, my voice echoing the script I'd recited countless times. The tour will begin immediately. There is a coat racked to your left for any belongings. I must urge you to follow me for the tour, but venturing off is, of course, entirely optional. The route began as it always did. I led the wealthy brats through the left wing of the museum. We passed the history and war rooms, the living wall, and the Mariana Trench exhibit. There, we housed creatures from the bottom of the ocean, species the public had never seen inside immense, pressurized titanium tanks. I liked that exhibit the most, but it wasn't tea time for it yet. The hallways were always hauntingly quiet on opening nights. The museum's property stretched for miles, so no sounds of cars or people offered any consolation to my lonely mind on long nights such as these. It was just me, the rich savages, and the exhibitions. We stopped at an intersection. To the right was the insect room, to the left, the paranormal display. Please don't see it, I thought. This way, please. Why were they stopping? I knew why. They had spotted the glass cabinet that towered by the entrance to the paranormal wing, and curiosity beckoned. It was covered by a dust sheet, only I knew what lay beneath, and I knew it was best left untouched. Can we take a look at this? A quiet voice from behind me asked, shattering the silence like a toppled vase. I had to maintain my smile. I couldn't crack at the start of the tour. That would be tragic. We will return here after midnight. Once we've explored the rest of the... One of the men interrupted sternly. We pay good money for this. He shouted, give us a look. I tug at my hair, surprised it didn't come out by the roots. Please don't make me show you. I don't want to wake her. Yeah, give us a look. More of them chimed in. I was no rookie to their psychological bullying, but it was in my contract not to put up a fight. Swallowing hard, the words escaped slowly, unwillingly. Yes, of course. My hand reached for the fabric as if it were a hot stove. I pulled the graphite sheet away from the case and flipped the light switch. Kick, 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 tack, tack. The fluorescent lights ticked and popped as they flickered to life inside the glass oblong that towered above us. The woman inside was ghoulishly tall, at least 7 feet. Any taller, and her head would have had to tilt to the side. Sometimes it did. Her black hair flowed onto her pale, shiny shoulders like an ashen willow. Her face was plasticky and smooth, the flesh of a child's doll. Beneath the glass cube, a plaque read, Mariette, 1973-2004. The portly man's face was tilted upward, utterly transfixed by the thin, soaring woman. How he cleared his throat. How did she die? I paused, my expression shifting in the dim, flickering light. Keek, keek, keek. It pained me to say this, but she was once the tour guide for this museum. My hand met the cold glass. Sadly, after a few years, she suffered a mental breakdown and passed away. A few gasps rippled through the group. Passed away? A woman's voice asked. My jaw tightened. She injected herself to death with plasticizing agents. That is one of the loopholes that allows us to keep her body on display. Her body is more plastic than flesh and bone. Keek, keek, keek. The lights went out. They'll all be back on in a second, I said reassuringly. That story is absurd, a man boomed. Unfortunate, certainly, but woefully true, I rebutted. The other loophole was her will. She wanted to give herself to the museum, just as I paused. The museum had given itself to her. The lights inside the case came back on. My heart sank. The clicking noises had not been coming from the lamps. The creaking had come from her plastic joints twisting and contorting, old plastic grinding against itself like a cursed figurine. Now, her head was tilted to one side, her glass eyes staring unblinkingly at me. My palm dampened the sheet as I managed to quickly toss the fabric back over the glass, covering her before anyone noticed she had moved in the darkness. Is that it? Someone asked. Can we touch her? I want to feel her rubbery, plasticky skin. Sends chills up my spine, said another. I couldn't say, no, my contract forbade it. These wealthy scumbags could kill me for sport and get away with it if they didn't get what they wanted. No one would hear me scream. I had to think quickly. We shall be moving on, I said, extending an open hand toward the hallway. This way, please. For some exhibits, I withheld the harrowing details. To feed them specifics would be to plant seeds of intrigue in their minds, and intrigue led to unsated curiosity. Curiosity always killed the cat, whether it was a pedigreed feline or a stray tom. I didn't tell them that the doll hated her glass prison. I didn't tell them that we had to close her eyelids so she could sleep. For a few hours, things went smoothly. I let them handle the child-sized, fluorescent beetles we had imported from Madagascar. I became so caught up in my presentations that I almost forgot about Mariette's snapping, plastic head. Mr. Jones, the man dressed for a convenience store, clicked his tongue. Hey, a guide, he said, hooking a thumb over his shoulder. We're going to head back this way to have a look at something else. I nodded reluctantly. The sound of his shoddy sneakers tapping on the marble floors faded as he and one of the women disappeared down the hall. For a short time, things truly were going well. I even allowed one woman into the enclosure with the glass butterflies, gorgeous insects, almost invisible to the naked eye, translucent yet poisonous. The remaining billionaires were yawning. Deep down, I knew what they really wanted to see. My chest tightened. It was in that moment I realized I was beginning to hate my job. From the hallway came the loud crash of breaking glass. Curiosity had killed the cat. Please excuse me, I muttered, sprinting down the dim corridor toward the paranormal wing. Moments after I started running, I realized I'd left the butterfly enclosure open. Behind me, shouts and the pitter-patter of feet echoed as the tourists fled in the opposite direction, running from the floating, venomous creatures. It was too late. I had to keep going. My heart sank. I already knew what I was about to find. The evening was no longer going well. Around the bend, I found a woman crouched against the wall by a window, a ball of tears, clasping her head in her hands. What the hell happened? I yelled. Her throat was tight, the words struggled to escape. I didn't do anything, they. I looked up. Shards of glass lined the floor like the devil's hail. A few steps away, the graphite dust sheet half covered a gaping, sharp hole in the cabinet. The lights inside flickered, mocking me. Glancing at my watch, my stomach knotted. It was midnight yet. It was midnight, and someone had broken Mariette's display. She was gone. Just like the crying woman beside me, my own throat felt tight. Come with me, I said, holding out a hand. We got up and ran until we caught our breath outside the ocean exhibition and the living wall. What is this thing? She said, staring at the peach-colored wall. "Don't touch it, please." I couldn't think clearly. Mariette was out there somewhere, clicking her ghoulish joints, towering in the halls, searching for more plastic so she could become the perfect ventriloquist-esque doll she had become so fixated on while working here. She would be a doll, and they would play with her, just as she would play with us. "It looks alive." The woman reached a hand toward the slimy, greasy wall. I felt lost. I couldn't breathe. It was too much. The butterflies, Mariette, the sick, rich people breaking things for fun with no repercussions. Finger-like blobs from the wall reached back, thick apricot worms searching for warmth. I slapped her hand away. "You mustn't touch that," I yelled. She gasped, and I realized my mistake. My contract was broken. My head would be on a spike. "Don't you dare touch me," she spat, angry veins bulging in her neck. I raised a hand to calm her. "I apologize, ma'am. This strange thing is made of living cells." Despite the trauma, I was back on script. "The very thing you're trying to poke could eat you." "I don't want to hear it. Thank you." We stood there for a while, unable to think or speak. I stared at the wall as if watching a fire, its flesh molding and changing. Peach-colored goo flowed in waves across its surface, inviting me to look closer. A golden placard beneath it read, "The Living Wall." I shook myself out of the trance. Richard Jones had returned. His green t-shirt was torn at the neck, his eyes sunken and traumatized. "The door is locked, guide. We need your key." I nodded. "Right away." I started jogging toward the foyer. He wasn't following. "Mr. Jones?" I turned. He was still standing next to the woman who had been crying moments before. He didn't speak, only glared back at me in the dim starlight that streamed through the window. When he placed his hand on her back and smiled, I knew it was too late. He shoved her. The woman shrieked and tumbled headfirst into the gooey peach wall. Her bones snapped as fleshy fingers wrapped themselves around her spine and neck. The goo flowed into her mouth, slowing only to pull at her teeth as if stripping meat from a bone. She screamed until she gurgled slime. The wall ate her whole, her features suspended for a moment on its waving, hungry surface. Richard laughed. He laughed and laughed. For him, money did buy happiness. Horrifying happiness. I felt sick. The wall's voice was deep, hard to make out at first. A woman's voice from deep within its slimy crevices. "Richie," it moaned. I turned to run, but he had already disappeared. I was safe. He had gotten the thrill he was looking for and vanished. "Richie." The voice faded. I lay crouched beneath the window, rocking in a ball with my hands over my ears. My heart hammered against my ribs. My stomach was a knot. I didn't want to be a tour guide any longer. Sprinting, I never looked back. I climbed the stairs so fast my thighs burned. Hours passed. Opening nights were long and terrible, but nothing like this was ever worth the money. I found myself hiding in a janitor's closet on the second floor, occasionally peering through the cracks at the horror beyond. After some time, when the vile people had finished their exploration, I heard Jones crack a joke about the woman and the wall. He and the rest of them laughed. They laughed all the way back to their private jets and their estates. When midnight came, Mariette was asleep. I shut her plastic eyelids for her. I had glass to sweep and a cabinet to repair. I had learned time and again that the nightmares were not in our walls. The horrors were the people who visited, in their sick pursuit of amusement. And I was their plaything. I'm sorry they played with you too, dear Mariette. The exhibition that made me quit was the sickening consequence of true human freedom, and it was a spectacle only for me to see once a week. Mariette still walks the halls at night, freed from her glass prison. Maybe I couldn't quit. I needed to repair her cage, to make things right. She has such a slow walk, glassy eyes darting left and right, rolling loose like marbles. Her head pivots, aimlessly looking for more plastic, needing more plastic to please the museum, to be the perfect exhibition. Kick, kick, kick. Before shutting the main gate, I pensively peered around the grand foyer. The museum was vast and harrowing. A grimace formed on my face as I remembered a time when all I needed to satisfy our guests was to show them insects. I had been here a long time. Tales dripped from the walls like an endless tap of horror. there would be more wealthy visitors. This week, I found myself alone in the ocean exhibition. The anglerfish circled endlessly in the abyss of its murky tank, searching for an exit it would never find. It met me at the glass, bumping its luminescent lure against the pressurized barrier. It grinned at me with teeth like thin white pencils. "Hello, little guy." I stayed a while, watching the creature bathe and flick around in its own little cube of the world. He could never know why he was in the museum, nor who put him there. So he swam. He swam and swam, hoping that one day the glass would crack. Just an inch. Luckily, feeding the shaggy frogfish didn't take long. The yellow fish knocked away clouds of dust along the bottom of its tank as it scurried on its leg-like fins with the awkward gait of a geriatric golden retriever. It was hard to stay happy in this ghoulish museum, but that room always made me smile. Upstairs, I worked through some paperwork for a few hours. I'm not sure at what point I fell into a catnap at my desk, but I soon paid the price in nightmares. "Am I pretty, Daddy?" a deep, muffled voice asked. Blowflies sprawled across a face framed with golden hair, black winged spots covering her eyes and mouth. "Am I pretty?" She didn't sound like Sophia. It was the face of my dead daughter, nothing more. It must have been hard for her to speak. Flies coated her throat like popping candy, bursting and buzzing as she spoke. "Daddy, did you doze off again?" She giggled in a voice that was not her own. Flies crawled around her face, whirring, buzzing, until I swatted one crawling up my arm. I woke with a jolt, groaning. My wrist was pink where I slapped myself awake. The monstrous foyer of the museum still clapped with an echo. My paperwork was scattered across the desk, stressing me as easily as it had put me to sleep. Lists of last week's casualties, notes on tonight's guests, complaints all forms of boring. A sheet unstuck itself from my arm and fluttered to the ground floor. The ocean exhibition and the escapism of naps were my only liberation from the museum. Though, that was before sleep brought nightmares. When I went to check my watch, I noticed I hadn't smacked a fly after all. A glass butterfly had become mere bits of translucent wing, coating my fingers like glitter. I rubbed my hands, and the clear fragments floated gracefully down the marble stairs, sparkling like dust specks in the beams of moonlight. For a moment, I wished it had stung me and taken me to a better place. At least then I couldn't dream of blowflies crawling out of my dead daughter's mouth. Ron, Jill, and the rest of the maintenance staff had packed up and left. The bustling noise was gone. There was no more work to be done except wait for more wealthy, deplorable people to arrive. I was alone again, and I let my mind slip to a different time. A time before I was the tour guide. It was time to open shop. I combed my hair, pulled my shirt collar free from my waistcoat, and shined my shoes. Down the marble staircase, I went, tapping through the butterfly dust like headlights in fog. The clock struck 6. The museum was now open. I pulled the large door, and it groaned, the sound echoing in the enormous foyer. 7 aristocrats strode inside. 3 men and 4 women clad in fancy dresses and coats. One man, leaning on a wooden cane, took his time coming up the front steps. "The tour will start immediately. There's a coat, rack to yo," I trailed off. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, came quietly through the door in a tiny black suit. Her unsure gaze scanned the foyer, her eyes large, glossy globes. She shouldn't be here, I thought. I didn't see her on the register. She won't survive. Kneeling, I spoke. "Hello, miss." The girl shyly leaned out from behind the doorframe, her skin turning as pale as the ivory marble. This had to be the first child to set foot in this godforsaken place, and for good reason. "Which of these people are your parents?" I tried to keep my smile warm. "Nothing." She simply stared at me with 2 shiny eyes under a blonde curtain of hair. "She doesn't speak, Sonny." The man with the cane cleared his throat. "Didn't speak the whole ride here. Won't speak now. Doesn't respond to anything. Really," a beak-nosed woman added as she placed her coat on the rack. "Probably deaf." I stood thinking for a moment, my face shifting in the light. Looking around at the billionaires, they already seemed ready to sink their teeth into the exhibitions, or worse. Bringing a child along with this group was not an option. Fortunately, it was a requirement for me to understand the basics of at least 20 languages to interact with the museum's guests. This included sign language, though my understanding was often broken. Kneeling again, I spoke to her with my hands. The girl gestured back that her mommy and daddy had sent her here while they were away on a business trip. How was the flight? I signed. Good. The big-nosed woman was very annoying. She giggled and gestured that I didn't need to use signs she could read my lips. I liked her already. My smile no longer required effort. Still, I was stuck with a child in an unforgiving place, a rabbit in an open field under the shadow of the museum's eagles. Worse, under the unsated curiosity of the wealthy and free. That's when I remember a clause in my employment agreement. Conduct one tour every open evening. Gesturing wide, I stood and improvised a way to ensure her safety. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, I exclaimed. Due to unforeseen circumstances, this evening's tours have been canceled. Groans rose from the crowd. The tour clause never stated how many people I needed to bring with me. Oh my, we just got here. A man bellowed. Do not fret. The museum is all yours to explore. I extended an arm toward the deep sea exhibition. Please, just don't wake the anglerfish. The tapping and screeching of their shoes faded down the halls. Starlight beamed through the windows, lighting up the girl's face. She beamed right back. Now, I said, the tour can begin in peace. Peace was a lie, however. Unsupervised, the crowd would soon find a way to demonstrate that they were worse behaved than the child standing before me, a demonstration that would likely involve death. What do you like to do? Drawing, she signed. I know just the thing. Many minutes passed as the girl and I explored the museum. Her name was Rosie, and she was very nervous about all the scary exhibitions. We halted at the intersection between the art and music showcase and a hallway leading to a locked door. What is down there? She pointed a tiny finger down the dark hall. That room with the metal door. What's in there? I know this museum from back to front, I said, but I have to say, I've never been in there. Tightly sealed. No key. Oh, okay. She gave a sulking nod. Yeah, I know the feeling. I smiled to cheer her up as I ushered her into the art and music space. It was like nothing she had ever seen before. Her bright eyes could have lit a candle. The towering walls and ceiling were flowing waves of sand that hissed as they rolled. One moment, the walls painted a shifting mural of starry night. The next, the wall to our left morphed into the scream. She spread her fingers into the sand waterfall, and it flowed between her digits like salt. It's so beautiful, she gestured, her mouth agape. I tapped her on the shoulder so she could read my lips. We don't just house paintings here. Take a look at these. Leaning against a small glass cabinet, we gazed in. Two brightly colored shoes sat upon an ivory silk sheet, iridescent against the changing backdrop of the sandy walls. They gleamed with a crystalline translucency. Beneath the cabinet, a plaque read, "The Clumsy Dancers." She was truly impressed until I heartily slapped the cabinet. The knocking brought the empty shoes to life, tapping and dancing upon the silk. One dance changed to another, then became a twirl. They gracefully ended their tango with the famous moonwalk. Wow, what are these? She pressed her hands against the glass. Well, some people might have a fantastic singing voice, I said, polishing the glass with a satin cloth. Some people have rhythm. These shoes, they bridge the gap. She was staring at me with wide eyes, listening with them, pulling the weight of ears that couldn't hear. They were developed sometime in the 60s or 70s. Helped push dancing inept singers into superstardom. I gestured her on to the next display. For a moment, I caught a sparkle in her eye. Her hair and bright grin reminded me of my dearly departed daughter, filling me with a long-forgotten warmth. I bet I'm having more fun than you are right now, Rosie. She took a seat. What's this, guide? Upon the table before her, a small white pen lay on a graphite and ash-speckled stone tablet. When I pointed to the thin edge of the black plate, she saw the golden placard that read, "Ballpoint Stone." She looked at me, eagerly waiting. "Go ahead, you'll see," I nodded. Her hand grabbed the pen and met the plate with a tap. Abruptly, the wall of sand bloomed a pale white, save for tiny peach-colored dots that gave it the impression of a canvas. As her hand swirled upon the plate, blotches of black sand formed and swirled against the wall-s coarse current. "Draw something rosy," I said. "The plate knows what you will draw and will guide you." Unsure at first, she shook her golden head a few times. An 8-year-old perfectionist. I smirked when I pictured her rolling up her suit sleeves to get the work done right. I laughed when she actually did it. "Is that me?" I asked, staring at the sand wall. A man with brown hair emerged on the moving canvas, dressed in a dashing maroon waistcoat. "Must be me." The drawing was a bit beyond an 8-year-old's skill. We had the pen and plate to thank for that. "Wow," I said. "That looks great, Rosie." She had all my attention as she began drawing another figure. "Who is that beside me now?" In the sand, a gawky shape bloomed from big black blobs. It looked familiar, yet terrifying. Diabolical. Sharp nails protruded from its lanky black arms. "Rosie?" "Nothing." She kept scribbling away at the plate. The thing loomed over my figure on the wall, the sand flowing, the creature looming. It was a sickening animation. One ghoulish jaw hung free from its disgusting, long neck. "Rosie!" It engulfed my head. Thin, pencil-like teeth cut through my childishly drawn throat, and red sand coughed and spat from the wall, staining Rosie's shirt like bloody rain. "Rosie!" I grabbed her arm. "What the hell are you drawing?" She glared up at me with glossy eyes, as if about to cry. "It wasn't me," she signed. I lifted her from the seat and set her on the floor, now littered with speckles of red sand. She turned to the wall and pointed at her depiction of me. "See, that's you." My heart was racing. Did the museum make her draw this? And her shaky arm slowly drifted to the black figure. That's Mr. Sleepy. I felt sick. I had tried so hard to pull her away from the mayhem, but the museum had bitten back. "Come with me," I said sternly, and she took my hand. Off we went downstairs to the indoor forest exhibition. I had to keep her safe. As we left, Mr. Sleepy turned his head and stared at me with vacant, horrifying, sandy eye sockets. I didn't tell her that. We saw a few distant visitors on the way to the forest room. They roared with laughter, screamed. I ushered her along, holding her hand tight. For a while, things were calmer in the forest. I explained that it was partly an aviary and reassured her the birds got sunlight through the glass ceiling during the day. This evening, however, only moonlight beamed through. Rosie and I startled a few birds as we crunched over the bark on the ground, delving deeper. "Quiet, Rosie," I gestured. "Yes, we have to be quiet." I pointed to a display wedged between two trimmed trees. It was dark, but we could make out the shape of a person inside. "That tree looks like a man," she gestured. "That's because it is," I whispered, her eyes lighting up. "An experiment gone wrong. We house it here so it can sleep. He is not human anymore. Feasts through his roots on anyone stupid enough to get close." The only sound was the crunch of leaves as she moved to press her nose against the glass. "Rosie," I whispered, "don't make too much noise." "What is his name?" "No name." I gently pulled her away, though some guests call it the slumber ghoul. He is relatively harmless. But one of our poor janitors fell asleep in here one evening. Never woke up. Her hand tightened around mine. "They say he eats you through your dreams," I whispered. "And if you're really tired, you don't even have to be asleep to feel it happening." That was all I had to say. She pulled my arm in a hurry toward the door. "Sorry for scaring you, Rosie." We had almost made it to the back door when a couple of blue butterflies landed in her hair. She had almost lifted one onto my finger when leaves crunched behind us. One of the deplorable rich people had found us. He was scrambling in the dark, reaching out with hands that couldn't see. His hand met the cabinet housing the tree man, his fingers making a loud squeak as they slid across the glass. Without warning, he smashed the glass, cackling as he ran out of the aviary and back into the halls. Rosie tried to break free from my grip, but I held fast. "It's okay, Rosie. The back door. Let us go." We jogged quickly through the trees, crunching bark and waking birds as we ran. The door to the aviary clacked shut. Somebody was locking us in. I jiggled the rusted doorknob to no avail. The door clicked, then bumped against something, refusing to open more than a crack. "Mr. Sleepy. Mr. Sleepy is coming." "Something S in a way," I grunted. Suddenly, the girl drummed her fists on my leg, then buried her face in my black trousers, hiding from something horrible. Beyond the trees, it towered, its flesh irregular and charred black like an ashen log. Its mouth hung unhinged, wide and ghoulish, its eyes a vacant white. It was watching us. Rosie, I held her by the shoulders. Rosie, it's okay, he can't get us. The girl looked up with glossy eyes. Monster, she gestured. It cannot touch us if we are well rested, I said. Stay awake, okay? I gave her a warm look, but my composure was cracking. Mr. Sleepy. We shared a gaze for as long as she could muster before her eyes met the ground. Rosie, I want you to stay calm when you answer my question, okay? I had to balance my gaze between her and the thing in the trees. Rosie sniffled, then nodded. Did you sleep much on the flight to the museum? My eyes darted to movement behind us. Blackened stumps where legs should be slogged under the ghoul, moving with the weight of an unrooted oak. Every slow step made its torso contort with a sickening crack. Its mouth had since widened enough to fit Rosie's head inside. Rosie, did you sleep? Crack. Rosie, crack, crack. Like a fever dream, I saw blowflies crawling over her eyelids and her mouth, just like my dead daughter, Sophia. Am I pretty, Daddy? I snapped out of it. Rosie, please. I boomed, shaking her. Crack, 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 crack. I had to get her out. I couldn't lose her. Not again. I shot up, launching her onto my shoulders and bolting toward the other door. Her head bounced as I ran, but when I steadied her, we saw the ghoul. It was looming close, a mere 20 paces away, its torso flailing with a disjointed crack. Hold on, I announced, holding Rosie to my chest. I kicked the door. Curses under my breath could not drown out the sickening sound behind me. All I could think was that its steps sounded like a boot meeting a snail. Get in, I said, and her shoes hit the ground. This time, I held my kick, planted my shoe against the door. I couldn't open it wide enough for myself, but it groaned open enough for her to slip through. For a split second, I worried about the rich people on the other side. One long, unending nightmare. I finally broke through. The rich people who had been blocking the door went sprawling like cockroaches. They cackled maniacally as they ran. Almost got you. One of them laughed as he disappeared around a bend. They couldn't keep getting away with this. They couldn't keep tormenting us for their sickening entertainment. Wait here, I told Rosie. She was a ball on the ground, shaking and sobbing. I shot to my feet and gave chase. The rich prick ran, his hands screeching against the walls of the tight corridor, our museum-esque greenhouses on either side. You almost killed Rosie. Sprinting, I had almost caught up. He was in arm's reach. Stop running. His leg caught on a foolish stride. He tumbled into one wall before pushing off it and into another, smashing the glass and falling halfway into the greenhouse. His spectacles had flown off. Blood drained toward his scalp as he hung over shards of the broken window. Starlight flooded in, blanketing his face in a greenish hue. Help me, he pleaded coarsely, one arm reaching up. Inside, Holly, our greenhouse Venus flytrap with a mouth big enough to fit a man, twisted and loomed in the evening light. She was a ginormous, beautiful plant. Hungry too. The man's head tilted back, and he set eyes on the plant. He wriggled, trying to free himself from the glass, piercing his body. I reached out to lift him, then stopped. Rosie's smile glowed in my mind like hot steel. My daughter, Sophia, had that same smile. A smile he wanted to take away. My arm retracted. Lift me out of here, he croaked. Hurry. I glared at him unblinkingly. Then it was over. With one swift swoop, Holly swallowed his torso, her green, hairy lips tightening around his body like mossy bandages. My employment contract had been broken. I would be punished. Globules of thick slime dripped from the flytrap's lips. Arms and legs burst from her mouth as she chomped. When I returned to Rosie, I held her hand tighter than I had all evening. I held it all night until it was time for her ride to pick her up from the courtyard. Broken glass and escaped exhibitions were the majority of the damage. For a few hours, I swept. When everyone had left, all that remained was for me to sit at my reception desk and wait for sunrise. My contract was broken. I had let a guest die, They were all despicable, I suppose, but that one had to die. Rosie's warmth dissipated hours after the museum turned quiet. Everything was cold again. I miss my daughter. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you like I protected Rosie. There would be more rich guests to torment me next week. There was no escape. I thought about the ocean exhibition. The anglerfish and I were one and the same. I love you, Sophia. Slumped at my desk, I lay broken. I rested my head upon folded arms, ready to let sleep come. I hope I don't dream of you, my girl. I don't want to see the blowflies again. For a while, nothing. Then, something quite curious. This week, I found myself scrubbing the Essietirburian mirror in the paranormal wing. The premise was simple. The mirror's deep navy, galaxy-sparkled reflection would read your eyes, and the deepest horrors from the recesses of your mind would scatter onto its surface like brain paint. I utterly dreaded cleaning it. I hated seeing my daughter's distorted face staring back at me, or the reanimated horrors of the museum eating my flesh. Yes, I'm talking about you, Mariette. I peered out the large doorway to the plastic doll in her display. My microfiber cloth polished the blood and muck from the corners of the mirror's ornamental golden frame, reaching between the crevices of the perched gargoyles etched around its rim. I swirled and swirled until it was squeaky clean. When I saw Sophia, I met her imaginary hand at the interface of the reflection. When I saw monstrous exhibition standing behind me, I rolled my eyes. Cleaning carried my mind away, and I thought about the museum rather than the labor ahead. I guess there is great fear in the unknown, and, like a disease, the fear I once had for the museum's daunting artifacts soon spread to another host once I became accustomed to its horrifying mechanisms. The unpredictable fear and excitement of the building bit the wealthy visitors like a rabid dog, and my panic no longer grew from the museum's walls, but blossomed from the cruel, diseased hearts of the people who visited. I could always predict how the museum would react, but never the manner of human malice. And every week, I had no choice but to confront them and mold myself to their erratic behavior. It was the same fear that gripped me 15 years ago before I signed the contract. The fear of finding out my daughter's cancer was untreatable without chemotherapy. We were young, and my job didn't pay enough. Hopelessness met me at the end of an empty whiskey bottle. I was a failed father with nothing but time to watch my daughter wither away, her joyful soul falling through my fingers like sand. That was until the day I saw a strange article in the newspaper. Tour guide wanted it read. When I saw the salary, I saw not dollar signs, but my daughter's bright smile. I witnessed her future graduation, her wedding a second chance from the cruel illness pulling her into a child-sized coffin. The employment contract was simple, yet unforgiving. The paycheck was huge, enough to solve my woes. But the paperwork was littered with strange clauses, most of which ended with, in event of breaching this agreement, employee is subject to immediate termination and exsanguination. Exsanguination, a showy word for being drained of your blood. I was in my 20s, desperate, and I assumed it was a sick joke. No organization simply murdered unruly employees. My wife didn't find it amusing, but desperation propelled me to sign for Sophia's sake, and the museum held me in its jaws for 15 years. The contract was indefinite, and early termination would result in one thing: exsanguination. This was no known organization. No one would hear me scream. Last week, the phone rang. A voice sprinkled with familiarity met my ear, deep and curdled between obese lips. It was the museum curator. I had not spoken to him in 15 years. "Hi there, boy, oh," he boomed, the hissing of stubble audible through the archaic phone. "Who is this?" I murmured. He bellowed, a fat man's laugh. "Oh, you don't recall?" My stomach sank. We spoke for a while. He was understanding, but beneath his bubbly tone was an unsated desire for cruelty. He was just like the rest. After a short chat, he coughed. "What I'm trying to say, lad, is that I appreciate your commitment." "That I do. For the guest list tonight," he paused, murmuring, Yes. 5 will be attending. For of whom are guests?" I nodded to myself. I was off the hook. But why was he calling? Great, I'll The last attendee is not a guest. Rather, they will be there for your aforementioned exsanguination. My heart stopped. Excuse me? Oh, it's not all bad, chap. If the attendee is incapacitated and unable to carry out this clause, Killy will see you on time for work next week. Cheerio. The phone clicked off. It was a painful week. My heart never left my throat. Every waking moment, my mind drifted, reminded that someone was coming to end me. I suppose that was always a risk with the deplorable brats who visited. But this was different. Their sole goal was to leave my body cold and lifeless. I checked my watch after finishing the mirror and began walking toward the foyer. Uneasiness and my turning stomach almost made me forget to feed TOTHFARY. Up the stairs I went and down the halls, passing the locked steel door. I had never opened it, and it always tickled my curiosity, but that was a matter for another time. The guest would arrive in 15 minutes. So would my executioner. At the end of the art exhibition was a dimly lit doorway I rarely entered. A golden placard above the entrance read, TOTHFARY. The room inside was a dark cube with black walls. A single spotlight illuminated a painting. A horrifying face of an anguished man was brushed across the canvas, looking like a hairless, burning corpse. Its mouth and eyes were vacant holes, distant white specks could be made out in the open cavities. Teeth, throat and eye sockets lined with hundreds of teeth. We were given this painting by a woman who saw the face move on her bedroom wall. Our cleaners kept the teeth from our deceased visitors for a special reason. Grotesque, but necessary. From my waistcoat pocket, I pulled a handful of bloody teeth and fit them snugly in the rim of the artwork S-frame. Monthly feeding was a ritual to keep him from leaving the painting. I hated the times I forgot. The times he crawled out of the canvas and slogged through the halls, looking for me. I checked my watch. 5:59. The museum was about to open. Quickly adjusting my waistcoat, I tapped down the marble staircase. With 2 hands, I pulled open the enormous door. As usual, the rich folks sauntered in. My eyes scanned them, assessing. Any one of them could be my undoing. There were 2 men, one plump, one gaunt. Of the 3 women, 2 were bony and frightening. The last was a pale, beautiful lady, her eyes small on a face framed by ash-black bangs and a ponytail. That woman, however, stood out. Her ponytail didn't suggest a rich girl, high horse rather. Her middle-class mannerisms did. She carried herself with the pride of a hard-working businesswoman, not the grandeur of someone reeling in millions. Was this her? I took them through a couple of exhibitions, passing the glass-walled hallways where Holly had eaten a man the week before. They clapped at the Venus flytrap's enormous mouth, oblivious to its horrific history. Though maybe one of them knew, the one the curator had spoken to. We stopped at the paranormal wing. They saw Mariette before their eyes set on something else. "What's under here?" a woman said, pulling at a display cabinet blanket. "Take a look," I said, pulling the fabric away with a shaky hand. He had no human mouth. His snout was the long, hairy tube appendage of a blowfly. You could see his black eyes in the incandescent light. They had faded to pitch after years of anguish. His face was charcoal black, as was his gangly body that sprouted wings and spiny limbs through hairy graphite flesh. There was no white in his eyes, only a screen door pattern upon 2 bulging, dark eyeballs that housed 1,000 more. He watched us unblinkingly, one deformed wing buzzing and clicking. Half human, half fly. Below the display, a golden placard read, Beelzebub. The woman with the ponytail leaned in, pressing her nails against the glass. As she turned her head to say, "Shouldn't he be in the insect exhibit guide?" The thing inside turned its revolting head, too, as if it could understand, as if it felt mocked. There were a few chuckles. My jaw tightened. They were upsetting him. He was there originally. Yes, I said, wiping a sweaty palm on my trousers. He was brought in by an anonymous donor, described as the product of experimental chemical warfare. The lady nodded pensively. The thing buzzed. However, I continued, our team quickly disproved this. We were unable to understand what this creature was or what happened to him. And so, he rots away in the paranormal wing. It's tragic but necessary. I personally believe the donor thought we were his last resort. Suddenly, one hairy feeler braced the glass, sticking to the barrier like a sickly black hoof. I felt queasy and wanted to move on, but the questions kept pouring. How'd he get that name? A man asked. In theology, Beelzebub was one of the 7 princes of hell. In Ugaritic, the name roughly translates to Lord of the Flies. My eye briefly caught the thing bending its head to the side like a confused dog, its disgusting tube snout rocking back and forth. Does it think? Like you or I? We simply don't know, I said. Not many staff come into this chamber, let alone interact with the pieces. Extending an arm, I ushered the crowd on. We walked for a while, until I noticed the woman with the black ponytail still pressed against the glass. Mayim? She pointed at it. I want to try to speak to him. He looks like he has some pain. I don't think that's a good idea. You probably pass him every day, she interrupted, her tone searing. Giving tours, cleaning cabinets. And not once have you tried to find out if he is still human in there? Her finger darted to his bulbous head. I glared at her. Did this guest have compassion? No, I swallowed. Was this her? The curator's inside woman? The one trying to kill me? If she got any closer, she would be as good as dead. And I might be the collateral damage. We should move on, I asserted. She snorted. No, I don't think we shall. She nodded toward the enclosure. Open it. You are welcome to communicate with it through the glass, I said, rapping my knuckles against the boundary. She stared at me with shark eyes. With the glass, he is an animal. Without, he is an equal. I want to speak to him as such. Now open the goddamn cabinet. I couldn't think straight. The curator's game was plaguing me. This had to be her. She was going to let Beelzebub free and kill us. Still, I had a plan. My shaky hand fumbled the master key into the lock. Inside, the abomination sucked its tube, snout back and forth in excitement. Its thousands of eyes saw fresh meat. The woman reached her arm around and climbed into the cabinet, her expensive slippers skidding. She was talking brave before, but now, confronted with the towering thing, her face was a horrified grimace. She wanted out. Her back still hung out past the doorframe, ready for a quick exit. My heart was beating out of my chest. She was going to let him out, and Beelzebub would suck my flesh through his face straw like a human strawberry milkshake. Breathing was hard. I felt like I was going to pass out. Without warning, I kicked her forward. My foot planted on her back, and she went tumbling into the enclosure, screaming. I shut and locked the door swiftly. The curator will not have my head this evening. I found her. Help me. She screamed. Gasps from the crowd sounded like wheezing balloons. I leaned against the door. You wanted to speak to him face to face. The abomination was reanimated. Spiny hooks spread from its hairy flesh it beat, its ghoulish, torn wings. It was ready to feast. What the hell are you doing? One of the men behind me shouted. I turned my head, complying. Suddenly, the woman's drumming fist did something the frail insect's hooves never could. She smashed a hole in the cabinet and came tumbling out in a cascade of glass. One of the pompous rich men laughed. He turned to run, but the buzzing monstrosity caught him. From its prison, it spurted slime from its mouth tube, covering the man's face like sage jelly dotted with smaller, black blowflies. It was like something from my nightmares of Sophia. The blowflies bored into his flesh, into his cheeks. Crawling didn't get him far. The flies were already digging. He screamed. Flies buried under his cheeks and crawled out through the corners of his eyes. Red, gaping holes emerged beneath skin that popped like balloons filled with bloody paint. The flies were even in his gums. He screamed and screamed until the screams were no more, until it was just me beside his corpse with the flies that crawled and squirmed inside his spiny flesh suit. On my knees, I vomited against a marble wall, my hand meeting his pool of life fluid. Exsanguinated. Beelzebub's mouth tube met one of the man's calves and sucked up chunks of his fleshy soup with a thirp. From crawling to standing, I broke into a sprint, dragging my hand against the marble as I ran, leaving trails of bloody finger-painted lines. My feet skidded as I bolted around corners, past the living wall and the deep-sea exhibition. At the end of one hallway, my eye caught her ponytail darting into the museum's theater. She was up to something. Her plan had failed now. She was finding another way to kill me. Inside, the theater was vast and ornate, with rows of silky lilac seats. Marble balconies reached out over the stage like great white clouds. Small holes projected streams of light. A brilliantly blue humpback whale, suspended in shifting light, floated from the entrance, down the slope of seats, before blubbering and disappearing into the wall as the projectors flickered. Specks of light from its spout hit my face like cold fingers. For a short lifespan, our theater and its holograms were real. The brunette woman didn't know that, though she was my executioner. Maybe she did. I slowly stepped down the staircase. She was shaking, screaming at me from the stage. Get away from me. I stepped closer. She didn't stop screaming. You locked me in the cabinet, which she trailed off as the lights dimmed to pitch black. The next show was about to commence. Trumpets boomed, shaking the theater. Spotlights illuminated a single holographic soldier cleaning his rifle. The next showing was a war performance I had seen many times before. My heart was pounding. The fly was searching the halls for more food, and we were the closest feast. I was pleading for us to leave, my voice lost over the roaring trumpets. The woman backed away, tears streaming down her face. As if possessed, the soldier finished cleaning his gun, turned, and gave me a sickening grin. White light flickered over revoltingly sharp teeth as he loaded his rifle. I had watched this presentation hundreds of times. This was a first. I screamed. The trumpets boomed. She kept walking backward into the soldier's line of fire. My mouth was agape, my soundless shriek tearing at my throat. The holographic bullet tore through her skull, a hammer meeting a fleshy coconut. Bits of blood and brain painted my waistcoat. The projected soldier showed his teeth. I thought back to the mirror I cleaned. Scatterbrain. Animated. The museum's horrifying specter slowly bent to one knee and began loading his rifle with the next non-existent bullet. I tumbled over seats and stairs, sprinting from the stage as he shot, holes tearing through the lilac fabric of the chairs like blooming flowers. I might have thrown up again if I didn't have to keep running. Beelzebub slogged behind me at the end of the hallway, his hooked feet screeching against the marble. Buzzing mocked me from behind as a deformed wing twitched in the starlight. Guests were still screaming in the foyer, darting like shaken ants. My hand reached for the front door. My executioner was dead, but my eyes were traumatized. I couldn't bear it anymore. I reached to pull the door open and the museum's phone rang. Once again, my heart felt like it had stopped. I let go of the cold door handle. Up the stairs I went, wiping a sweaty hand on my trousers. Reluctantly, I reached for the phone. Hello? My quiet voice fell out. Oh, guide. The sound of the plump curator pulling from a cigarette. Your debt has been paid. None of tonight's guests were anything special. I swallowed sour spit. What do you mean? They're middle-class volunteers on a luxury-sponsored trip. None were there for the exsanguination. And boy, oh, did you prove you belong here or what? I slammed the phone down, the sound of plastic echoing. A cold feeling flooded my chest. My horrible realization dismantled me. This week, the guests had never done anything particularly dreadful. It was I who had cornered them into hell out of fear for my own life. My punishment was never death. It was torment. Was I a monster, too? For a while, I cried in the foyer, oblivious to the carnage unfolding. Tears flowed down my face, staining paperwork of dead guests. My hand still shook. Beelzebub was coming. I didn't like what I was becoming. There were two unopened doors at the museum that had always haunted me. The locked steel door I had passed countless times, and the shut doorway to Johnny Razordung's display, the only exhibition I never entered out of unadulterated fear. Johnny Razordung is why Mariette, the previous guide, went mad. It said his plastic ventriloquist dummy tongue speaks only in mind-shattering truths or lethal lies. He chooses whichever brings him the most entertainment from his deprived, sealed cell. His disturbed mind knows only disarray. Mariette knew this all too well. The dummy poured pestilence into her ear, contorting her once fortified mind like molten glass. And so, Mariette's ill-fated psyche bent until she was no more, until all that remained was her doll-like shell after she gave in to Johnny's razor tongue. After she injected herself with plastic to become a dummy, just like him. It was snowing the day I decided to leave. My hand braced the cold window pane, iced with white clumps, the warmth sucked out my hand like cigarette smoke. Years prior, when I had started, I received word that my daughter's cancer had taken her. A letter. The hospital informed me by mail, which meant she had been dead for days before the paperwork arrived. The fact of it shattered me. I decided I would rather live with insanity than carry on with the burden of a dying child. It had been snowing that day, too. Before venturing into Johnny's exhibit to let his toxic words take me as they had Mariette, the snow reminded me of holding her gloved hand at winter shows, and her face in my mind as I begged me to keep living. I didn't visit him that day. Until recently, I felt no obligation to ever try to break my contract. Sophia, my world was dead. Why would I leave? I could stay and hold the ghastly hand of her ghoulish reflection in our haunted mirrors. Here, Sophia was with me. Stopping to gaze up at the enormous foyer, I was reminded that I, too, was an anguished exhibition. The poor guide to push and pull at. Look at his hollow eyes, the visitors probably thought. Look how dead inside he is. No more misery. My daughter wouldn't want me to wither away like this. It was going to be freedom or death. On my way to visit Johnny, I walked past the locked steel door, past the arts and music exhibition, downstairs next to the living wall, and into the paranormal wing when something caught my eye. It was Mariette. She clicked her pale joints and fluttered her heavy eyelids. She was on show, but her soul was still very much alive. A soul that pushed her hand against her glass prison as if to say, "Stop, guide. Look what Johnny did to me and what he will do to you." I'm sorry, Mariette, I thought. Believe it or not, Johnny is going to help me leave this horrible place. I was so focused on my plan that I almost forgot to feed Ernie. I could never forget Ernie. Beyond the insect exhibition was our animals and evolution room. It was rather dull, but Ernie always stood out like a hairy, clawed thumb. I walked swiftly through the marble halls, climbing to the balcony that stretched above his iron-barred pen. I tossed him heads of lettuce, which he chomped with an effortless, wet crunch. See, Ernie was a bear-sized mole, and he had a secret. He was a gentle giant, and I loved him. It was so difficult to find a kind soul in this abominable place. So, I kept a secret. I found a hole he had dug to the museum-esque garden, and I let him have it. He could have his freedom if I couldn't. Completely dreading it, I took my time on my way back to the paranormal wing. Visiting Johnny was a necessary evil. The plan was based on the belief that I was well adjusted enough to figure out if Johnny was telling a truth or a lie. If he lied, I would unveil it, flipping his lie on its head and using the opposite of truth to my advantage. 15 years of experience was behind me, something Mariette never had. My mind had become a steel fortress. I just hoped Johnny couldn't meld it as easily as he did hers. My master key met the rustic, untouched lock and twisted with a clank. With one slow, reluctant pull, I opened the door for the first and hopefully last time. It was foolish of me to assume the lights would still turn on. I turned to grab the torch from my hip, my eye catching Mariette a few meters behind me in her display, facing away in disgust. I swallowed tightly and smacked my flashlight alive against my palm. Johnny was sitting on a black stool in the center of the small room. The light from my torch lit up his pale skin, which contrasted with his baby-sized tuxedo. From the corners of his lips down to his chin were thick red lines cutting into his plastic face, forming a mouth. His voice was croaky, yet dripping in sickening enthusiasm. "Hi, I'm Michael." His words broke me. I hadn't heard that name in years. A decade, even. I was lucky to remember it. After a while, my name simply became Guide. But how? Buddy pal. His eyes wandered loosely in his sockets. "How's it hangin', Mikey?" There was no dust on his combed hair or suit. His mouth was ever smiling as he leaned to one side. "And how is my girl?" His stiff frame peered at Mariette over my shoulder. "Oh, isn't she just gorgeous now, Mikey? Look at that plastic shine." This thing was revolting. And Johnny turned his stiff head to me, smirking. "How is your girl?" Dead in a hole. Mikey? My stomach plummeted. I would have torn his tiny, disgusting head off if I didn't need him. The puppet laughed with a menacing whine. Hey, Sophia, she rotted in the dirt? My fist clenched. The spotlight from my torch shook. Maggots probably crawling out of her cheeks. Mikey? Hey, stop. I burst out, my echo carrying through the empty halls. For a while, he sat quietly, his legs kicking the air like a kid on a pier. He stared up at me with horrifying, glassy eyes and a devilish smile. I'm leaving the museum for good at 6 o'clock. I gulped, watching for hints of truth or lie. What do you think about that, Johnny? His head suddenly spun around several times. Wow, friendo. I have lots to think about. I do. For a while, I watched his puppet eyes roll around, showing only white. He was contemplating. You want to find any freedom outside, Mikey? His mouth pulled open mechanically. Though, you'll find freedom. One tiny arm beckoned me closer. He was whispering through the steel door. What? He leaned back, his plastic chin dancing in the light as he laughed. Hey, I thought about it. That steel door had remained sealed since I started. He kept chuckling before abruptly going quiet, his eyes locked on the old guide behind me. Oh, Mariette, he called out in a childish croak. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Outside that tense atmosphere, I felt like I could breathe again. If only I could have gotten more information out of him than a simple, straightforward lie. To avoid the lie of entering the steel door would be no drama. All I had to do was run, as I always thought I would. When I checked my watch and saw it was 5 minutes to 6, I bolted into the enormous foyer. The guests would be arriving in minutes. The towering door opened with its usual groan. I pushed past a man with a salt and pepper beard, his blustering coat nearly catching my face. The weather was against me, but the plan was already in motion. The plan was to run. I almost tumbled when one of the rich pricks snagged my arm as I jogged down the stairs. I couldn't hear what he said. The swirling breeze swam in my eardrums. It was beautiful. Every step into the frozen garden made a gentle hush in the snow. I couldn't look back until I met the tree line. When I did, I saw a few men giving chase. I launched through the spiny bushes, taking exaggerated steps. Cuts and scratches from branches felt liberating. It was painful, but it was not the museum-esque contraptions hurting me anymore. It was the fresh lashes of wild, unpredictable freedom. I'm almost free, Sophia. I could feel the warmth of her smiling down on me. Guide! A deep voice boomed, and my heart spiked. They were closing in. Why were they after me? I had left the door wide open. Turn around and burn the museum down, you horrible bastards. There was no doubt that if I stopped, one of them would bash my brains out with a rock. How dare I, the suffering guide, threaten their fun? Quick clapping and crunching of bark behind me made my ears prick. Without warning, a hand snagged the red silk shoulder of my waistcoat, and I was yanked backward, tumbling into mud and muck. I pulled my head up with a groan, my joints aching. The guest straddling my chest was a mere silhouette, the stars behind his head lighting up his graying hair. His cold fingers met my throat, tightening. Wriggling was hard with his legs against my chest. Clumps of snow fell gently on my face as his hands crushed my neck. I swung at his kidney, but he didn't let up. The stars above became a blur. One of my keys, clenched between my knuckles, punctured his side, and he went rolling down a snowy bank. Gripping my bruised throat, I stumbled forward, wheezing. Stop! His voice called. With each step, the snow seemed to get thicker. I couldn't let up. Not this close. Beyond the snowy bank was a large building I had never seen before. A warehouse. It didn't take long to limp to it and break inside. The smell of rotten wood and mold crawled up my nose. Bars of starlight came through boarded windows, covering the walls and floor in crooked, glowing streaks. It was dusty, unkempt. Thudding came from behind me as someone pushed at the door. Unsettled flakes of crumbling would drifted down. The shoddy place couldn't hold him for long. As my heart raced, Sophia's face glowed on the black canvas of my tight eyelids. I think I'll be seeing you soon, darling. I stumbled forward, coughing, as the thuds became impatient. I needed something, anything. Where you think you're going? A muffled voice boomed from under the door. It was the same man. His tone was strained. My cold digits wrapped around one of the planks sealing a window. Boarded shut. My options narrowed to fight. Thud! The door was stubbing against something, but not for much longer. One of the lines of light sparkled on something made of glass. I walked closer. When I was near enough, a cold feeling bloomed in my stomach. The thing was animatronic and ghoulish. Clumps of its brown, fraying fur were matted in sticky balls of black grease. Its glass tennis ball eyes held tiny, black pinhole pupils. It was a human-sized depiction of a vintage stuffed monkey holding brass cymbals. Stuffing had come away from its middle, exposing rusty metal gears. I tried not to make eye contact, fearing it would follow my gaze. I still had to think quickly. Messily stuck to one furry ear were a few pages of forms, faded and dusty. I puffed away the dirt. It read, Exhibition name, Kelsey. Children's mechanical mascot that once educated schools about the importance of healthy teeth and gums. I hadn't noticed it until now, but large, eerily human-shaped teeth stuck out from the monkey's fur lips. An animatronic monkey to tell your kids to brush their teeth. Of course. Out of commission, 1983. Reason, excessive homicidal tendencies. Signed and approved, Mariette. Mariette and I connected by threads of time. This must have been an especially terrifying item to warrant locking it up here to rot. I couldn't believe I'd found something retired by the previous tour guide. It made me feel less alone. I hadn't felt that flavor of deep-chested, rotten fear in over a decade. But this evening, I was again in unfamiliar, petrifying territory. Why was I not informed of this place? I would have decommissioned Johnny Razordung in a heartbeat. If not for me, then for Mariette's tortured soul. Without warning, the stuffed mechanical abomination switched on. It chilled my blood to see golden iridescent bulbs flickering where its lifeless, beady globes had been. Its jaw gnashed wildly, lagging and biting. It was stuck in a loop, seeing through eyes that hadn't seen the world in decades. It turned to me, gleaming gears and yellow eyes feasting on the one who broke its sleep. Me, Kel. The speaker tried to sing in a childish voice, but the rusty electronics could only cough up distorted noise. When it finally started the tune and began walking, I made for the door. Calcium. Drink milk for bones. Put in your tum. My hand met the handle. I went tumbling backward as the man kicked it in first, my elbow collapsing into a rotten floorboard. The mechanism behind me sang, and her cymbals crashed. Bonus. Strong teeth for bite. No moans. Brush your teeth at night. The intruder's hand was immediately aiming for my throat once more, but I was faster. I turned quickly, catching one of his arms and pulling it behind his back in a lock. Twisting, I faced his kicking legs outward at Kelsey. The cymbal-clapping monstrosity approached slowly, gears churning. Crash went the cymbals. They crashed until the gears caught both his boots in its exposed core as he tried to kick her away. But he was locked in my arms. It took a while for the man to stop screaming. His feet met the unyielding gears in a red cloud of skin and bone. Calcium. Drink milk for bones. Put in your tum. The once childlike voice became choppy and deep-pitched, like a singing birthday card with a dying battery. I could only hope my daughter wasn't watching me ghoulishly smile as my pursuer struggled. Close your eyes if you're watching, honey. Daddy is going to be free soon. The man screamed and screamed. The dying speaker sang and sang. Calcium. Metal gears were up to his calves. His cartilage popped, his leg bones buckled and broke like thick white pencils as Kelsey snapped his femurs as if he were fleshy mulch. I only let go when he finally became limp. His screams were no more. All that could be heard was the mechanical spinning and clunking of gears. For a while, I sat in the dark as it ate him whole. It felt good to finally fight back, but it was never meant to feel this good. The sound of his bones crunching, his voice extinguishing like a wet flame. I was no longer going to be the one tortured. I was going to be free. Though, as the age-old saying goes, ignorance is bliss. I wish I hadn't looked down at the mutilated man. I wish I hadn't seen that he was not someone wealthy, not a guest. Catching a proper glance at him in the dim moonlight shining over his overalls and glistening keys, it became terrifyingly evident that he was museum security. I killed a man who was just trying to do his job. No, I didn't. I didn't. The museum did. Deep down, I think I knew I was responsible, and that I might have enjoyed watching it happen. But it was time to keep moving. I swiftly bent down and swooped up a metallic lighter and a ring of many keys before leaving the stuffed horror alone to eat. Most of the keys were long and identical to mine. Snow was blowing outside. I had to squint to see and orient myself away from the museum-esque grounds. For a while, I walked aimlessly in the blistering snow, seeking not a goal but salvation. The weather was relentless. I was ill-equipped. At some point, I had a call with the curator as I stumbled around the barren, icy wilderness, but reality bordered on delusion. You can never leave the museum. Michael, the voice buzzed. You two are entwined. My jaw was chattering. I watched the steam from my mouth escape. This money, the curator continued, the type of money to let you run something like this, your contract simply does not end if you leave our borders, Sonny. You should know this. All I could hear was the clinking of a lighter and the curator sucking on a cigarette. I think it is time you expire, boy. Oh. See, we even have a new guide lined up to replace you. It's over. I'm going to be free. My voice was slow, hard to hear over chattering teeth. The curator scoffed. No, Michael, you're not. I want to thank you for letting those people who are lonely at the top, those rich and famous, who are under constant judgmental eyes, letting them truly be somewhere where they are not themselves. At our museum, they can be the audience, not the newspaper-esque exhibitions. And you were instrumental in such success. Breathing didn't come easy. The air swirled and chilled my lungs. I'm going to be free. Farewell, Michael. The phone clicked off. I staggered for a while. Hypothermia brain fog had me going in every which way. I had no chance of making it back. Did I want to return? No, of course not. It was cold, and I was tired. I lay down in a pile of snow under a naked tree. The evening-esque breeze no longer felt like anything across my numb face. Just for a little while. I'll sleep in the cold for a little while. I tilted my head back, letting my eyelids drift shut. The stars above sang me a final lullaby. For a while, the constellations looked like my daughter-esque face, and I smiled. If I held a handful of snow tight enough, it didn't feel like I was dying alone. It felt like someone was holding my hand, and the fear started to blow away. But the snow in my hand was hairy, and it was warm, and it was breathing. A cold pile beneath my arm erupted into the air with a snort. His brown fur looked unworldly against the field of snow. He couldn't see much with his two black, beady eyes, but he knew it was me, and I knew it was him. Ernie. I swiftly buried myself in the thin layer of concave snow that Ernie's pink and brown head came from. It was hard to see anything inside the hole, but it was much warmer. Inside, the lighter no longer faltered, and I caught the tail end of the mole's pink hind paws in its soft glow as he scurried back through the tunnel toward the museum. I crouched and slogged through the tunnel, using only the lighter and Ernie to guide me. Warmth returned to my extremities. Come to think of it, the lighter was not the only thing I had found. Upon the keyring I had taken was a peculiar long and winding key I had never seen before. I was spitting out specks of dirt by the time I made it back. An earthy taste coated my tongue. Soil stuck to my grazed elbows. When I finally emerged, Ernie's snub nose was sniffing and snorting as I patted his furry head. Pompous cackling beckoned me from the hallway. Wiping muck from my watch, I saw it was already 9 o'clock. The deplorable guests had been roaming for 3 hours. I didn't want to ponder the damage. I was about to leave for the foyer and make my way toward the sealed door, but then it began, and my heart felt as if it had stopped. One after another, the display cabinets throughout the museum exploded into clouds of broken shards. Shattering bangs echoed down the hallway, the floors above, the greenhouse. It was a symphony of broken glass, a cacophony of impending frenzy. The air was intense, scalding. Its tour guide was trying to leave, and the building exploded in a hot, retaliating rage. The museum abhorred my attempted escape, and the exhibitions were let free. From the halls, the cackling guests soon found quiet confusion, and silence swiftly grew into screams. Glass displays still distantly popped like clattering hail. It occurred to me that the museum itself was an exhibition a wealthy man's Pandora's box. And, staring at the violent, exploding glass, her message was hauntingly clear. If she couldn't have me, then no one else could. Two men frantically bolted into the room, running from an unseen horror. Their faces were polar opposites. One spoke volumes of fear, the other's jaw was tightened with disdain. Mr. Frightened and Mr. Angry. Here, they knew they were going to die, and to hear the museum narrow their death sentence with every pop of distant glass felt intensely euphoric. What's going on? Mr. Frightened's voice was a helpless drone. Where were you? I held my breath. From their calming demeanor, it was evident they felt at ease in the seemingly dull animal wing. I would have felt the same if I hadn't caught the finger-length chameleon crawling up Mr. Angry's wrist. The other man saw what I was looking at. He looked down at Mr. Angry's forearm, and his eyes bulged. "Oh, God," the man with the chameleon said. "I read about these. On the placard." How to get his voice was shaking. I backed away. This didn't concern me. I had to escape. I had to find out what was behind the steel door. "It's gonna bite me, all right? It's venomous, right, guide?" Mr. Angry shrieked. "Get the hell off me." I interjected, stepping back. "No, though it..." Without warning, the man peeled it from his skin, one thumb pushing against the chameleon's neck to expose fangs. Mr. Angry swiped the reptile at the other man, and its mouth stuck to his skin like a dart. And he laughed. The rich and famous were never going to change, I thought, watching Mr. Frightened squirm, blood drizzling from the freshly carved holes in his neck. Never. The bitten man looked like a chameleon for a while. At least, part of him did. His wounded neck skin bloomed orange-violet. Scaly flesh beneath his jaw was iridescent. Human cells were never meant for camouflage. Mr. Frightened didn't make a sound, only an anguished grimace as his skin flowered sage, then ocean blue. The pain was clearly insufferable, enough to want to spoon his bloodshot eyes out. Though, the worst was yet to come. There was never venom, but the chameleon's bite was turning his skin. When his human shell could bear the stress no longer, the blotches of scales as flesh had morphed and became clear as glass. Transparent areas bloomed in circles, growing like puddles in rain. He went to grab a banister with a ghoulishly crystalline hand, but he couldn't have known that the contagious clear pigmentation would also make his flesh as thin as paper. Pointy finger bones tore through the tips of his fragile skin like staples as his hand touched the wood, and he screamed. Mr. Frightened fell to one knee, the only limb that still showed the true color of his flesh. As he toppled over, I saw his liver, his heart. All organs were on show as I stared through his back, which looked like a translucent veil. The chameleon's contagious pigment spread to his neck bones and his skull, and his skin and bones bloomed as clear as a window. No sound came from his mouth when he screamed then, only the sickening tearing that came after his brittle, see-through neck snapped under the weight of his brain. His head made a splash as it dived from his shoulders onto the marble floor. Watching his facial skin flake away to translucent dust, I was reminded of the venomous glass butterflies. I wouldn't be surprised if this was how they originally came into being. There was a brief, satisfying respite. When my heart settled, I recalled how vulnerable he had looked with his organs showing, how scared he must have felt. His memories, his hopes, his rich ego, all ending in an instant. How gratifying. The other man tore me from my ecstasy as if plunging me into a freezing bath. Mr. Angry was wildly swinging a hammer, it narrowly missing my nose. "We're completely fucked because of you." His voice lashed me. He swung again and missed. I was already on the move. I bolted for the door, my feet skidding. Angry guests, exploding cabinets, it's all too much. Sophia, I thought. I know you're watching me. Honey, I'm gonna be free. I reluctantly passed the steel door as I climbed the grand staircase. I was gonna open it this evening, but not until I could shake the angry, wealthy prick on my tail. The floor inside the arts and music exhibition was littered with shattered glass. I went straight for the back wall. Above me on a golden placard, the TOTHFARY. Mr. Angry followed me, wielding his hammer. Nowhere to run, guide. He turned left, then right. No, reanimated freaks left here to do your bidding, eh? His eyes scanned the floors. But the tooth fairy didn't do my bidding, and it didn't need broken glass to be set free, only the deep, nauseating hunger that rumbled within its canvas belly. An ash-colored hand tore out of the painting beside me, slowly reaching. Strings of oil pigment, like bloody syrup, hung from its arms and neck as it hoisted itself out. Its face had no eyes, only a jaw, mouth, and cheeks below a jagged outline of a missing scalp. The man turned, but the tooth fairy's fingers were long, and its famine even longer. It leaped from the canvas, pinning him. His hand went limp, the hammer slipping from his grip. My heart was racing, but watching the animated painting pull the man's teeth felt intoxicating. A vile amusement burned within as I counted the number of teeth the ghoul had to unroot before the man's words became a wet, indiscernible mess. 6, 7. When there were no teeth left, it started on his lips pink leeches that peeled away. Hell me, least the man gurgled. I smiled. The tortured tour guide I once was proved to be no salvation for him. Perhaps only dentures were. I picked up his hammer and left him there to expire. The museum foyer outside was as it always was, ornate and grand. I looked up at the mosaic ceiling and laughed as I walked down the stairs of her belly, an orchestra of exploding glass and screams drowning my chuckle. The horrifying museum for the rich and famous was absurd, and it had eaten me whole. I had the key to the steel door. My misery would come to an end. I can feel you smiling too, Sophia. Dad is leaving. The hallway wasn't too far. Not much longer, Sophia. My stomach sank. I didn't anticipate the curator standing outside the metal door, his two stumpy legs barely holding up his grape-like frame. Michael, he said sternly, his back almost flat against the cold metal. Please don't do this. The head of the hammer in my hand shined. I walked toward him. Oh boy, oh, the curator said. You've gone mad. That grin, he shook his head. The museum has gripped you, hasn't it? My fingers patted my lips as if they were going numb. Oh God, how long had I been smiling? If you turn and leave, his thick voice was shaky. We one T come after you. You have a choice, Mike. I contemplated. Cold from the broken foyer windows chilled my bones. Retire, be free. Lie what years you have left. Or enter the door, and you'll never leave. It'll break you, boyo. It'll break her. He held his hands up submissively. Please, Michael, do you want to leave? I wanted to reply. I wanted to say yes, but the museum held my tongue, my arm, and the hammer swung and swung. Each blow was half Michael, half museum, but all of it, every crack of his skull, every slosh of his brain, was the bite of 15 years of torment. It was surprisingly easy to turn his skull into broken shards and a gurgling fountain. Blood ran freely onto the ornate floor. In the poorly lit grayscale of the evening, his life fluid stood out vividly. My breath was labored through smiling teeth speckled with red paint. He.S. dead. He.S. really dead. It took a while to catch my breath. When I finally did, I fumbled for the key and found that it slid into the steel door with surprising ease, as if it had been opened regularly. The door groaned open. Circular lights adorned the short metal hallway, leading to a second wooden door. Above it, a golden placard. It read, "The next." My stomach plummeted. In bold letters, "The next guide." I reluctantly pulled the second door open. If I'd been wearing a smile, it was gone. Pink wallpaper plastered the walls, peeling in curled rips, save for one well-kept wall decorated with Polaroids. Shelves were littered with teddy bears, the floor with clothes, the ceiling with fairy lights. I moved to the wall of images. As I picked one up, I caught the scent of iron from the dry blood on my hands. It was dated 3 years ago. Center frame was the curator, slimmer than, alongside a blonde teenager in a tidy ponytail. They were smiling. Another Polaroid unstuck itself. Upon the white bar, messily scribbled, Flytrap S. birthday. Dated a couple of years prior, It depicted the curator and the girl, younger this time, beside our giant Venus flytrap. This photo had been taken at the museum while I was working. What is this place? Reaching to the end of the wall, I picked up the earliest photograph, dated 15 years ago. The curator was sitting next to a hospital bed, the slimmest I had seen him, with a full head of hair. Beneath it, more writing, cancer-free. On the bed beside him was the same young girl, maybe 5 or 6. She had bright blue eyes and Sophia. The pink room was spinning. I felt like throwing up. This can't be happening. The curator was right. I was going mad. Dad? Her voice was quiet, distant, afraid. It broke me in two. I turned. Those same eyes, that same smile. My sweetheart was older, in her early 20s. It had been 15 years since I last heard her voice. Sophia? The words trembled from my lips. For a while, I cried as she hugged me. I thought about how the curator had doctored the hospital's notice of death. I thought about how Sophia had been beneath my feet the entire time, caged like an animal, enslaved as a future pawn. But after some time, I only thought about her smile. When she pulled away, her eyes caught the bits of the curator's skull on my waistcoat. We still caught up, but after she saw my coat, her smile faded, the sparkle in her eyes gone. Still bawling, she sat on her bed. Where have you been? Right here at the museum. Honey, once a week. The other days I spend off-site, never far, I said. They don't let me visit on off days. They have lots of cleaning to do. She was choking up. No, they don't, she sniffed. Dad, the curator shows and teaches me about the museum on those other 6 days. She pointed to the Polaroids. He says I'm going to be a superstar tour guide, loving every moment, just like you. I thought back to the placard. The next guide. It felt like my heart was going to give out. This world was cursed. Cruel. Honey, it doesn't matter what he said. He is a terrible man. He has been raising you to be. I shut my eyes tightly. I didn't want to tell her who he was, that her life was a lie, her caregiver a monster. He is grooming you, darling, like cattle for slaughter. You're going to be a pawn for the rich and famous, just like me. She was shaking her head. No, she sniffled. That is not true. It's not. She bolted up and made for the door. The curator is my friend. He wouldn't do that. I was shouting. He is as bad as the rest. Honey, listen to me. They're all monsters, all of them. All the rich and famous that visit this god-forsaken horror house. She had never seen them. She was hidden away. She didn't know where to begin unraveling my incoherent rambling. She was just a sobbing mess. I want to hold her arm, but she screamed. Get away from me. I felt helpless. Listen to me. Please, I said. The rich are deplorable. They are here once a week. You just don't see them because you're locked. She sprinted through the door. Sophia, don't. Her slipper splashed as it met the maroon puddle outside. She screamed, not only because she was beside the curator's mashed face, but because at that moment, she knew her father was a monster. The words fell from Sophia's trembling lips. You're a monster, Daddy. I want to grab her to tell her it was all right, that we were free, but she slapped my hand away and shrieked. My voice was quiet, pleading, I'm not a monster, honey. She was backing away. Pale moonlight painted bloody steps upon the marble where her slippers had been. Looking down, she didn't see the disgusting man who had tormented me for 15 years, nor the man who had kidnapped and groomed her. All she saw were the remains of the honest man who had raised her in her father's stead, and I had just scattered his brain across the floor with a hammer. She broke into a sprint down the hallway. I screamed after her and gave chase. When I finally saw her again, she had stopped in the middle of the foyer a few steps from the door. Beelzebub and the Tooth Fairy were patrolling the halls, slowly making their way toward us. The museum's abominations were not wandering aimlessly. They were searching for me. The museum was searching for me. It was not going to let me run free. The back of her blonde hair was facing me as she wrestled with the door locks. Sophia shrieked as I made my way past her and jammed my master key into the door. My heart was racing. The key that had worked for 15 years was not turning. I kept twisting, cussing as the exhibitions loomed. It would never open. Not this evening, because something was amiss. The museum had no guide. Inside the foyer, Beelzebub fluttered a broken wing as it sucked its disgusting mouth tube in and out. When they reached us, they would pull the teeth and flesh from my bones. Sophia would be next. No, she was going to be free. The ground scratched as Beelzebub dragged one contorted foot across the marble. Closer, and that S when I knew what I had to do. My arms were wide. I will be resuming tours at 10 o'clock. Please leave your coats on the rack in the foyer, I said, my voice echoing. The sound of scraping and smashing glass was no more. Is that what you want to hear? I screamed at the museum. The two horrifying exhibitions stood frozen. Is that what you want? I trailed off, falling to my knees. Tears streamed down my cheeks. The museum would have been satisfied with either me or Sophia as the guide, but it was always meant to be me. Always. A clack chimed from the door behind me. Sophia and I both turned. Snow drifted slowly through the large doorway. I made out the gloss of the curator's black sedan parked near the steps. Do you see? I said. I took Sophia's hand, holding her cold grip tightly in mine. This museum is cursed. The people who visit it are cursed. Reaching forward, I braced her pale cheek with my other hand. Look at what I've become. Look at me. Staring into her, I saw my sweetheart, my world, my everything. Sophia was here. She was real. Alive. Look at me, darling. Tears streamed down my face. I may not be your father, I muttered. Not to you, not anymore. I brushed her hair from her brow. But I want you to know that I love you, Sophia. When her wet eyes met mine, I knew she hadn't seen her dad. She saw the museum, and I'm glad she did, because if she hadn't, she might have stayed. I will always love you, my girl. I like to remember her smiling in that moment, but it may have been a trick of the mind. I let go of her hand, leaving the curator's car keys in her shaking palm. You get in that car, and you go, I said. She sniffled and nodded. You go and don't stop until you are safe, honey. Johnny was right about finding freedom through the door, though it was never mine. The museum had possessed me, just as it had Mariette. I could never leave, but Sophia could. Goodbye, Dad. For the first time in years, my smile was warm and genuine. False memories of her future flashed through my eyes as I watched her breathe the cold air on the outside steps. I saw Sophia's first day at her real job, the smile on her face at her wedding, her children starting school. My eyes followed her as she disappeared into the snowy evening in the curator's car. When I faced the museum, the exhibitions had wandered on and the building was silent. I put on a ballroom waltzing record before I began sweeping the glass from the cold floors. The exhibitions were free, of course, but it was no secret how I had survived 15 years of trauma. The museum had protected me from its exhibitions because I was her guide. As I made my way around the ground floor, I noticed one glass display that had not broken. It was when I had passed the paranormal wing that I saw her. Her hand braced the window of her prison, and her fingers slid down with a screech. Come on then, Mariette, I said as my key fit snugly inside the glass cabinet. The music from the record player was a divine tune of strings and soul, a song to dance to. I felt a spring in my step as the old tour guide and I made our way to the main hall. The beautiful evening stars above the mosaic glass ceiling painted the marble foyer a beautiful azure. My grip made its way through Mariette's cold, plastic fingers until we were holding hands under the night sky. Her face was that of a shiny doll, but it did not matter. She still had the soul of the young woman who once walked these halls, and she was stunning. This evening was her time to feel young and alive again. Leading, I held her hand, and together, Mariette and I slow danced in the moonlight. Mariette, my daughter is free. Sophia is free. She is out there somewhere, starting new life. The moon, the museum's marble, and my heart, the color of cold lips. The old guide, and I waltzed left and right. ISNT that lovely Mariette. We twirled under the stars.